chapter 4, here's what Solomon writes. He says this, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor, which means it's better not to wash the car alone. I think that's what he had in mind there. Now, verse 10, this is why we do what we do. This is why it's central, not peripheral. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. But pity, this is pretty strong. But pity anyone who has no one to help them up. Now, we're in ministry, so we've seen people stumble and fall physically. We've seen people stumble and fall with their health, stumble and fall with their finances, stumble and fall in their marriage, stumble and fall with their kids, stumble and fall with their family, their profession, academically. And we've also seen people who stumbled and fell and there was no one to help them up. And we've also seen people stumble and fall who were in group. And they didn't even have to call the church because there was somebody already in their life to help them when they stumbled and they fell. One of the questions that I ask our people constantly or whenever there's an opportunity as it relates to group is this question. Who feels free? Who feels free to ask, are you okay, and won't accept I'm fine as for an answer? Who has permission to freely say, hey, are you okay? And I'm not gonna take fine for an answer. Only people who are in community, now maybe not community group formally, but only people who are in some kind of community, and oftentimes it's a friendship, but in the communities that many of us live in, friends come and go, neighbors come and go, people come and go constantly. But at some point, everybody at every point in their life needs to have somebody, and it's really better if it's more than one person, who can say, hey, are you okay, and won't take fine for an answer. The text says, but pity those who fall and have no one to help them. And here's the tragedy in local churches that don't embrace genuine community through small group. When people stumble and fall and there's no one, there's actually almost nothing. When people stumble and fall and there's no one, there's generally nothing the church can do. See, one of the myths for people outside the church is there's such thing as the church. And here's what I mean by that. They say, well, I'm gonna call the church. Well, no, you're not. You're gonna call somebody. There's no such thing as the church. Well, why doesn't the church? Don't you hate that as a minister or a pastor or somebody? It's like, why doesn't the church do this? And why doesn't the church do that? And I wanna say, why don't you just drive up to the building and ask it? Because you're talking about it like it's an it, but when it doesn't do anything, there's no such thing as the why doesn't the church, and why I'm gonna call the church. What is that? That doesn't even mean anything. That doesn't even make any sense, linguistically. I'm gonna call the church, why doesn't the church? Now we know what people mean. But the reality is what you do and what we do when it comes to group is so important because that is the church. And people who are in circles and people who have people who are working alongside them, when they stumble and fall, the church automatically comes to their rescue and picks them up. And then if they need to, they might call the church office to get other parts of the church to assist them. But what a tragedy when people who sit in rows week after week after week after week have an emergency or a tragedy, and they have to call the phone number of the organization, and someone they don't know and is not connected picks up and says, can I help you? And I got this stuff going on. Let me connect you to. And then they feel like they're being passed around, and they are being passed around. It's because they're not connected relationally to the church. It's why you do what you do. It's why circles really are, it's not just a saying, it's why circles really are better than rows. Is that groups are preventative. Groups aren't just about, hey, we're all gonna get together, so if something messes up or something breaks, we'll be there for you. That's certainly a function of groups, but it's better than that. The above the line part of groups is that groups is preventative. Why? Because somebody can see what I can't see, right? You've sat in groups, lots of couples, and you listen to the couples interact and you think, uh-oh. Are you listening to them talk about how they're disciplining their 13-year-old daughter and you're thinking, uh-oh. And they can't see it, but you can see it. They can't see it coming, but you can see it coming. In groups, somebody can always see it coming. Now, you've been in restaurants and listened to couples talk to each other and thought, uh-oh, but you're not in a circle with them. And you've been at the mall and seen how, fathers talk to their 13-year-old daughters, but you're not in community with them. But in community group and small group can be extraordinarily preventative because somebody can see what you can't see and you can see what somebody else can't see. And where else is there a life-on-life match to where people can say, hey, I need to bring something up. I noticed, and because we're in a circle, you have already given me permission to speak into what I see. Every time we gather in circles, whether it's with kids or children or middle school, high school kids, or with adults, there is a preventive thing going on, and the problem with it is you can't measure it. I mean, we know how many couples in our church maybe got divorced, but I don't know how many couples didn't get divorced because they were in circles for 4 or 5 or 6 years. I don't know how many marriages are healthy because the young woman, when she was single, and the young man, when they were were in community group for 4 or 5 or 6 years, and then they finally met at some function and got married. I don't know how much healthier their marriage is because they were in group. It's preventative. We have no idea what's being prevented, but groups is preventative. You just can't measure it. But as group leaders and as leaders in your church that are all about groups, you dare not lose sight of that. The point is, there is way more going on behind the scenes than you may be aware of in the circle.